love this scene. Peter and them are out fishing, and Jesus is on the shore fixing breakfast, fish. And of course, you remember Peter, man. He took his garment and girded his loins and dove out of the boat to swim to shore. And so they sat and ate there. And to me, that's among a lot of other things, that's the most human setting you can imagine. Someone sitting around eating fish. I still remember when I was coming to understand the gospel, and I thought, okay, nothing else I believe just has turned out to be true. So I was kind of dreading, what if the deity of Jesus is not true either? And so I went and I read the Gospel of John, this and that, and I went, it is true. Because how much are you going to confront these people with? After all these things you told them, are you also going to tell them that Jesus is not God? And I thought, oh man, that would just be the cork in the bottle. But a couple of years later, sure enough, it turns out that I was wrong on that too. And that Jesus was indeed human in every aspect, tempted in all the ways I am tempted. His flesh was constantly trying to distract him from the will of his Father, just as mine does. And he overcame everything. And so I say, well, what does it mean in John 1:1 then? The Word was with God and the Word was God. What is that dealing with? A Jew reading that would understand that, because it was an old Hebraic understanding, an expectation of Messiah, that he would be God and not God, and that he would be human and yet God. And so I thought, what does that mean? And I was reading in Exodus chapter 4 and verse 16, where Moses is saying, oh no, don't send me, and all this stuff. And God says, look, I'll send you with Aaron, and before the people, Aaron will be a prophet and you will be God. And it says the same thing in chapter 7 verse 1. Aaron will be a prophet and you will be God. And I also remembered that it said in Deuteronomy 18, Moses said, God will send a prophet like me. And the first chapter of John is actually John altogether, has a constant theme of comparison of Moses and Jesus. So what does it mean when God said to Moses, you will be God before the people? Because there is our answer. Because if Jesus is a prophet like Moses, then he must be God in the same way Moses was God. But when I was a child, my dad would leave the home, and I remember several times him saying to me, when I'm gone, your mother is me. And so you will listen to her as though I were here and talking with you. And believe me, you don't want to face me if you don't. And so I understood that concept very well. And so to the people, Moses was representing God. And they had to pay attention to him just as though God was standing in front of them. And it was the very same thing. If you remember in Deuteronomy 18, it says, God will send a prophet like me, and you must listen to him. And it's the very same thing. Jesus was the perfect representative of God before man. And when he spoke, he was speaking with the full authority and the full personage of God behind him.
Just lapping up. It's right, the edge is right where your foot is. Just all the way out.
Yeah, they
as
are.
far as I can see, they just keep going out.
Huh.
And it just gets shallower and shallower to...
That's interesting. Many will ask, well, what about the passage that says that I and the Father are one? Isn't this saying that Jesus and the Father are the same being? Well, if you go over to John chapter 17 and verses 20 to 22, in verse 22 it says that Jesus prays to the Father that the disciples would be one in the same way that he and the Father are one. Well, if you try to fit The idea that when he says I and the Father are one means that they're the same being, well, you can see that makes this passage untenable, because Jesus wouldn't be asking that the Father would make all his disciples one person, one being. That's not the point. He says in the same passage, he prays that they would have complete unity. And so the idea is that he's asking for a unity of heart, that they would be one, like-minded.
We have a few broad, short steps right here.
Jesus' death was always a problem, because if you picture someone who is God and man, what you do is you divorce yourself from the problem caused by his death, because how can a person who is God and man, how can his humanity die? What happens with his deity? I mean, he's God and man. We believed he was 100% God, 100% man, all in one person. And so the whole being was the God-man, and how can that person die? We came up with some interesting theological hat dances to get around it, but your mind can never really get around that.
12:05.
One day I was doing a word study of the Hebrew word for spirit, the ruach, and I came upon a series of passages. This was when I still believed in the Trinity. I didn't have any questions about it yet, except that in the back of my mind I knew that the Jews had never believed in the Trinity. And so there was always that knowledge that the Hebrew view of the world was that God was one person, and that there was no Trinity. So that always stuck in the back of my mind back then, but I didn't have any reason to doubt it yet, until I was doing this study on Ruach. And in these passages, primarily the one that was most interesting was Genesis 45:27, where it says that the spirit of Jacob was revived. And here you have the phrase, the spirit of Jacob. And in the scriptures, you have the phrase, the spirit of God. And all of a sudden I realized that in this passage, the spirit of Jacob, that you didn't have Jacob and a separate person. The spirit was not separate from Jacob. The spirit was an aspect of Jacob's being. And so the spirit of God, the spirit is not a separate person from God. The spirit is an aspect of God. It is an aspect of who and what God is. And I went, uh-oh, we have a problem here. And I realized from those passages that the whole concept of a Holy Spirit that was a separate person was contradicted by these passages. And that kicked that door open. And I realized very soon and very quickly that the doctrine of the Trinity was simply without foundation. It has no foundation in the Tanakh, in the Hebrew Scriptures, and in fact, the Hebrew Scriptures make the belief in the Trinity completely untenable.
It's just like any of the other concepts of the Scriptures. You have to be willing to be honest, brutally honest, and take the Scriptures as they are. And it would be very tempting to just wipe your hands of it and walk away, because it does seem very daunting, especially if you realize what kind of opposition you're going to get should you decide to seriously explore it. If you go to the trouble, you take the time, you invest the honesty, the willingness to let the Scriptures speak and say what they are saying and not what you think or what you hope they're saying. There'll be a cost that goes with it, but it's very much worth it, especially when it comes to the fact that God, our Father, will be very pleased with our willingness to listen to Him. It must be more important to you to please the King of the universe than it is to please men.